So I have After Effects open here. And when you want to start something new, one of the easiest ways is to just go under Composition and create a new one. So you guys can't see much of those settings right now, but this is by default. It's at NTSC, which is sort of a Western profile. If you were overseas, like London or something, you'd probably use PAL, P-A-L. But NTSC is like a West thing, and we're saying it's sort of regular widescreen. But actually this says 720 by 480, which isn't widescreen, so that's interesting. 720 by 480 is sort of the normal standard screen. But whatever, I'm just going to roll with it. And we've got 30 seconds of duration. So when you first down here, this little thing that's called duration, if you can see it. When you first open it, you can set how many. Let's see if I can. I can't really zoom in on this for whatever reason. But the idea is there's basically 4 places where you can input data here. The zeros that are all the way over here are your frames inside of a second, so up to 29.97. Basically, you've got about 30 frames in a second over here. And then the middle 2 are your actual seconds. Right here, it's got set to 30, so it's got set to 30 seconds. Over here would be your minutes, once again, sort of 1 through 59, right? And then this single digit is your hour. So from left to right, it's hour, minutes, seconds, frames. So if you want this to be 2 hours, 25 minutes, 15 seconds, and 15 frames, you put a 2 there, 25 there, 15 and 15, right? You sort of get how that's flowing out. So that's how when you're going into a new composition, you can set the duration. Now you can always change it later. You can pretty much add and take away as you will, but it's not a bad idea to be intentional when you're first going in. You can set the background color. This is not something that necessarily has to appear. It's what the background will be filled with. If you don't fill the entire video window with some other content, right? So I'm going to go with something a little bit more neutral here than this sort of incredibly bright fuchsia that we have going on. You can, of course, always sample from various things. You can, when you tap in here, you can put in hex codes. You can set RGB values. Of course, you wouldn't set CMYK values in here because pretty much all video projects are meant for screens. So it's all RGB values. So there's no CMYK because we're not making a print project, we're making a project for screen. And you can toggle the preview and that sort of thing. So again, this is just sort of setting up the basic compositional settings to get something going. You can name it up here at the top. I'm just going to call it random composition because that's what it is. And say, okay, so now here I have it. I have my 720 by 480. I think that's the basic resolution there. I have my basic screen size. It's not widescreen, as I mentioned, which I'm still kind of puzzled why the default said widescreen and its standard aspect ratio, but that's okay. You can see here that it is the default view. You've got your layers and timeline down here, which are super important, and you have your project pane over here on the left. You've got all this preview and various speeders and things over here on the right as well. And we have 1 active camera. So all these things are super important. You can do all kinds of crazy random things with them. But I'm just going to import any object to the screen here and do some. The other day we did some motion across the screen. This time instead I'm going to show you scale and opacity. So we'll make something change scale over like 4 or 5 seconds of time, and we'll cause it to change opacity as well. Just so you can understand, once again, sort of the really basics of getting something going here. I know some of you guys are way more advanced than this, but for some people this stuff is brand new, out of the box new. So let's get anything that we want to use here. I'm going to go ahead and bring in the old X-Wing fighter again, because why not? So again, down here, if you import something as footage, it sort of comes in as one piece of art when we're talking about art. But if you import it as a composition, you have the ability to bring it in at various layers so that you can sort of, when things sort of pop into perspective, you can treat it layer by layer if you want to do sort of sort of a pop. You guys have all seen this type of thing where something comes in, it sort of pops forward and jumps back for a second, and sometimes the layers around it. It's sort of a squash or a squishing technique. Let me see if I have anything right here that we could do that with right now. What do I have out on the desktop here? My Cebu, my cow. This is a really bad logo that I made for my daughter's class the other day. She's like, I need a logo of a foot with a wing on it in the next half an hour. So that's what I did. It's an easy kill 9 having it. That has my Scully. What's that? I just double tapped in the project, but you can go under File, and I think Import is what you'd want if you wanted to bring in art. Import rather than open a project. That's Monarch. I can bring in that skull thing, but it's very Halloweenish. Graffiti's got a bunch of stuff in it. So my Good Monster Yeti. Well, let me just show you that. I'm going to bring in this is my logo for my little production company that I have on the side. So here it is. When I'm saying I want to bring it in as footage, it's saying, do you want merge layers or choose a particular layer? I'm just going to bring it in sort of normal. Now, it's over here. It's in the project pane, but it's not on my artboard or on my stage yet because I've just imported it into the project itself. And in fact, it's not really even imported. It's just a placeholder pointing to an external resource, all right? But if I just drag it down onto the timeline, it will come in like so. Now because it's vector and because I want it to stay nice and crisp all the time, there's a little slot right here. If you hover over it, it says, for vector layer, it will continuously rasterize. And since vectors are meant to give us crisp resolution at all times, it's a good thing to go ahead and check this box, so that your vectors will remain, no matter how big or how small you make it, it will continually render a rastered view that's at the right resolution. So that's good stuff. And we didn't get into motion blur last time, but we might take a look at that today. So on my layer that I've dragged in, if you twirl down your arrow, again, you get little transform properties there, bring it down again. There's sort of like 5 main ones. I don't do a lot with anchor point. That has to do with some 3D stuff. It also has to do with doing a lot of fancy rotation stuff. By default, the anchor point would be sort of right in the middle. You can see it there right in the middle of this sort of monster nose. Your anchor point will be there. But you can sort of animate it over time to do some sort of dynamic twirly stuff, but we're not going to get into that today. But I have my scale. So if I tap on that, I'm at 100 now. I can just tap on this and key in a different value and just move my monster my monster head kind of back in space. I can also hover over these and just slide it left or right to get it where I want. All right. So I'm going to start it about right here. I'm going to zoom it in and sort of pop it back, and then I'm going to apply some opacity stuff to it as well. So my basic idea for this is to cause this little monster to zoom in close and then just sort of snap back just a little bit in space. So it looks like it sort of pops at you and then it settles into its space. So I'm going to do that with the scale property. And what I need to do is I need to set my little stopwatch to get my initial keyframe, because all animation in After Effects goes by keyframe, right? You sort of set where you want things to begin, and then you kind of set where you want them to end. But my timeline right now is super long, so I'm actually going to make it a bit smaller. Under Composition, if I go to my Composition settings, I can make this way less than it is now. I'm actually going to make it about 0.8 seconds. Say OK. Now, even though it looks the same here, my timeline looks the same, we're now looking at frames, instead of minutes, so it'll be a much shorter composition than it was. So I'm going to turn on the animation for the scale property. I'm going to go out just a little way in time. I can tighten this up later if I want to. That's 4 whole seconds. I don't want that. I'm going to go out to a little bit more than 2 seconds. And I'm going to up the scale a little bit larger than what I want the final thing to settle on. And I'm going to go just a little bit further than that, and I'm going to settle it where I actually want it to be sort of nice and evenly positioned. So what you see there is it'll go out. So if I scrub through, it pops in, goes a little bit bigger, and then it snaps back to how I actually want it to be. So it zooms in and snaps back. It'll give it a little bit of a popping technique, and we'll add some easing on that in just a moment. Yes. Yeah. So if I'm going too quick for you, yeah, you'll be able to review it because I know it's a lot. So to put easing on this, you can just sort of draw a little marquee or drag a little window around the keyframe that you want. Hit Control and right click. In your keyframe assistance, you can set ease in, ease out, or the easy ease. So what I'm going to do now is sort of preview this animation real quick. And that's up here in your preview panel. If you don't have it, you can go under like Window and choose Preview to get it up. But if you just sort of play it, we'll do a quick RAM preview. And you can see that things are just sort of like too far out in time. I want that whole effect to happen quite a bit quicker here. So I'll try it again. Yeah, that's not a bad little poppy effect. What I should do is go back there and change that probably only to easing back out, or actually should put this one probably on easing in and leave the easing off of that, but you can experiment with that stuff on your own if you want. The easing takes a little bit of getting used to, and as we saw last time, I'm a little bit rusty on it. But the other thing that I want to do, so let me play that for you again. He just sort of slides in and pops back. He just sort of bounces into place, right? The other thing that I want to do is I want to fade him in from the background gray into full opacity over the course of about a half of a second here, so that it looks like he's sort of coming in at you out of nowhere. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and hit the opacity and start it at 0, and he goes away completely. And then if I drag the playhead a little bit further out in time and put it back at 100, what he'll do now is he'll fade in over that little bit of time. So now if we preview it again, pops it out of nowhere and sort of snaps back there. All right. Once again, if you want to ease in that animation effect, that fading in from total transparency, you Control right click on the keyframe and apply some easing. I'm actually going to drag that out just a little bit so the effect is a little bit more pronounced. Preview it again. All right. I have to tighten that up a touch. That's just too much space when he pops back. Try it one more time. Yeah, it's really garish because I have the easing all wrong on this particular frame. But go ahead and name your project. Put it right back there in that courses folder where we do, and save it. All right, so we did mostly positioning last time. That's a little bit of an idea of scale and opacity. So again, the main thing is put your playhead where you want it to be. Toggle down your traits down here, your transform capabilities. To get your first keyframe, turn the stopwatch on, and then move your playhead in time, and then change the values here. And all you have to do, once you've got that first keyframe, all you got to do is move your playhead. And as soon as you change one of these values, it will instantiate the next keyframe for you and automatically do what we call the tweening, or the in-between transition. All right, from the first keyframe to the last keyframe, we'll tween it automatically for you. So that's basic sort of scale and opacity stuff in After Effects there. All right, I'm going to pause this thing real quick.